strategic.
Mhm.
They in fact brought up the Godfather's parking lot,
Yeah.
as we always call it. You know,
Correct.
there's more than two problems there, but lighting and a good pathway, you know, to get to where there is activity downtown, but lighting was brought up, and that's in the downtown plan too.
Yes, yep. And that downtown plan, when we're done with this comp plan, as we've talked about, will kind of be that living, breathing document that we update and improve based upon these conversations. So some of the elements that you all have brought up, of course, will be included in the goals and objectives of the comprehensive plan, but we'll use that to guide future updates of that implementation strategy document. So the next one we have here is marketing the location and availability of parking in a clearly understandable way. Cribbing directly from the downtown plan, we say comparing walking distance to recognizable landmarks. So, you know, how far away is it to the levee? How far away is it to the historical society? And then in general, improving wayfinding signage. So we have a specific call out, but wayfinding signage, as we all know, has been one of the key things overall that we need to talk about. There is an element that we're considering adding in that we reference later on in this document, a street design guide that would include wayfinding as well. So that we're considering adding that as kind of a core element of the transportation section. And if we do, we'll call it out specifically here as well. Pursuing shared parking opportunities with privately owned parking facilities. Increasing enforcement of existing regulations with new technology. Here we talk specifically in the downtown plan about license plate readers. So I called them out as an example. And then implementing a parking improvement district that reinvests parking revenues in downtown. We talk about that up here a little bit about creating channels for public investment back into downtown. So I added that as an objective. We talked briefly about it. Is it something that we do want to keep here as an objective? I'm seeing some head nods and not a lot of talking.
So the only parking revenues that the city is making are from fines. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah. So this would be if we are actively managing toward that 90% marker, for example. Do we say, great, well, in those areas we can start doing charging for parking and reinvesting, or do we say that we should start doing permits for long-term parking for our businesses? This is not necessarily defining if we are going to implement a specific version of what that would be. It could even be a half-cent sales tax or something similar. I know I'm being recorded, so I don't want to be too specific about what I'm proposing. But something similar. We talk about how do we get those monies to be sustainable in the past and sustainably reinvested.
That makes sense. I think I missed when we talked about that before. I just wasn't as dialed in.
Okay.
But yeah, that makes sense to me.
There might be some pushback, and you know, historically, I mean, I can remember when we had parking meters, that's a long time ago, but paid parking, retailers, you know, getting kind of nervous about that, but recognizing we don't have a resource to make improvements either. There's kind of a good balance there, but I don't think we would want to do that without really communicating and getting the input of the property owners and businesses.
And I know one of the things we talked about, and maybe it's captured here and I'm just not reading it, but one of the things we talked about was revisiting the, you know, the time limits that people can park downtown. And does it make sense to potentially look at changing those, maybe even lowering them so that it requires people to park outside of downtown and utilize the other parking spaces that are available? And I think what we talked about was, well, what do the business owners want? Because it's parking in front of their businesses. So we want them to be accessible, but yet do we need that park, you know, do we need it to rotate more often and frequently? So I don't know, maybe when you say review, you know, what we currently have in place, maybe that's all part of that.
Yeah, that's the intention, but I'm calling it out specifically here as a separate objective for it as well.
Yeah, I think you touched on three things that I think are both between the two are really important. Working with business owners, and kind of preparing for pushback. And then just, you know, communicating what the changes are well, just in general. I think all of those are essential and worth kind of calling out for any changes that are made to parking.
Absolutely. And I think that again, we're at a 30,000 foot view. A lot of that will have to be kind of integrated into our overall
Sure.
public process as
Yeah.
well. Absolutely. And that's one of the things that I think when we talk about street design guides, for example, having a process in there, you know, hey, we're considering an infrastructure project. How are we communicating it to the stakeholders?
Okay.
All right. Public safety, I know that Ethan has had lots of thoughts on public safety so far in this group. Improving public safety in downtown to create a space that's perceived as safe and approachable. So we, you know, how do we make sure that people feel like they want to be in downtown? Improving access and mobility was the last kind of bullet point that we had in the downtown strategic plan. And here we say things like implementing traffic calming measures in downtown to prioritize walking and biking and transit, implementing public infrastructure improvements that make moving through downtown safe, convenient, and comfortable. So how do we actually encourage that by the built environment, basically, is what we're saying. And then communicating emergency preparedness to the downtown community. This is currently in our downtown strategic plan. And how do we make sure that emergency management plans are available so people know we have them and that they are downtown specific because we have unique buildings. And then also, how are we communicating that? Do we have an education plan to actually reach out to people? And can we do it as an education outreach directly, or should we have signage, for example? Encouraging activities in downtown throughout the day. So increasing the amount of activities, increasing residential density so that we have businesses that stay open longer because they're serving a community, serving a market, getting the eyes on the street, activating buildings and increasing transparency in the built environment. This would be another opportunity for us to review our design standards in the Unified Development Code if we wanted to, which currently requires 60% transparency and 20% on the upper levels. And coordinating on those placemaking and public infrastructure projects. And here we have something that we call it specifically is crime prevention through environmental design. So the idea is that we actually create environments that encourage people to be out and crime doesn't want to be developing. So, you know, avoiding vacant lots, avoiding dark spaces, avoiding all of that. So really just kind of calling that out here. And then again, that public safety direct outreach, let's make sure that we look at our staff levels. Do we have a staff member who can do outreach? You know, as you guys are probably aware, we can only have so many police officers. If we're assigning people to doing this, we need to make sure that we're actually evaluating that we can do it in a sustainable manner.
There is an article in the Winona Post today about some of the challenges we have had as a city in the police department and parking enforcement. You know, we are down quite a few police officers, and the community officers are the ones that do the parking. We've lost a few, so we've gone back to a part-time model where our parking study says, you know, you need a full-time model, but trying to, and it's hard to get people to work in that area right now. So.
The community that I moved from had, they call them downtown ambassadors. And so they were bike control, you know, bike patrol people. They weren't police officers. So there was a different level of training and pay that was involved. But they were more kind of connected in like with the Visitors Bureau and that type of thing. But it was a public safety presence without being an armed officer that was just there as somebody that could help answer questions, guide people, and just be that active community presence. And that was something that was always nice to see. That provided that without there being a fear of escalation or whatever, just to have those eyes on the streets.
I like that a lot. I think that that's a good thing to add if everybody else feels pretty good about this.
Yes, absolutely.
Rahel, we haven't heard from you in a while. Thoughts?
I think the downtown ambassador is a great idea. I think that program could work really well in Winona.
So that wraps up our final sections that we were kind of walking through. I do want to note that I made some changes to the overall document in the terms and in the total layout. So what I did is I actually shifted everything basically down the hierarchy one block because there were some really clear goals that were encompassing a lot of the goals that we were talking about. So if we scroll up here a little bit, what I'm going to draw attention to is develop clean cleaning and beautification improvements in downtown, and this includes what we previously had as standalone goals of increasing greenery and landscaping, incentivizing historic building restoration, activating street space, and then those original objectives that we had kind of become strategies. They were really kind of specific. So I felt that that was maybe a more appropriate shift for this. If you guys tell me otherwise, I will happily go back and revert that. But really, I want to make sure we have them all in there without being too overly specific on those goals. And if we scroll down ever so slightly, I do want to hit the communication section in particular. So we have this increase in communication in downtown with downtown property owners and business owners element here as a goal. And the objective elements that we created, we've actually had 3 different goal sections related just generally to communication in this instance. And I wanted to highlight things that I did ultimately end up combining with this goal, unified communication for downtown businesses and property owners, and consistent communication. We just kind of removed that to a unified communication strategy. And then we already were calling out consistent communication up here. And then we add it, and then we also remove provide opportunities for regular feedback because we have the opportunities for regular feedback. Hello, Mary Farrell.
No, I apologize. I got helping Pat figure out how to do a Zoom meeting for tomorrow, so I'm not gonna be able to take the time to walk over to the city hall. So
That's okay.
sorry about that.
We were just kind of running through and making sure that everybody felt comfortable with the way the document is being laid out as it currently is, because I was combining some sections that we previously had standalone goals with rather specific objectives. They felt maybe more like strategies and objectives underneath goals.
So just to clarify, what you have cross-eyed is what we had before, but you're taking out now. Is that
But
correct?
it's still here in this,
Okay.
in this section of objectives. That's correct. It was just redundant.
Just happy to see, a specific call out for, walking and biking patrols.
That was because you suggested that.
Yeah, I have no objection so far to what I see.
One thing that I apologize that I missed a meeting, but that was part of an earlier discussion that I didn't see in here was the kind of connecting tissue between the parks
Yes.
in the downtown areas. And I was thinking about, like the bike trail that goes under the bridge and right now kind of goes up onto the bridge. But I thought, there are ways, is there a way to connect that with, the other parks that are kind of around the downtown area so that we're connecting our green spaces and instead of having them feel like islands.
Completely agree. And we can all think of the really famous park networks, like the Emerald Necklace of Boston or the Chain of Lakes in Minneapolis. We know those connections, right? And yeah, right now we just have recreation locations and destinations that have clear connections to downtown. I think that there's a real opportunity there to elaborate on that. And what I'm hearing from you is creating a network. Really.
Yeah, connections to each other and not just, because it's easy to, like, when I read that, I thought, oh, we're going from Levy Park into downtown. And that's the connection we're talking about, but it's like, no, it's all of these other things as well.
And that's reiterating some goals that we have in other subcommittees as well. Do you, as this is downtown and Riverfront specifically, do you want to say with a hub for downtown? Should downtown operate as that hub? Or should it be really more, you just want to reiterate that goal of interconnectivity as a network?
Yeah, I just have in the back of my head that there was a conversation that said, decades ago, downtown went away from the river and toward the lakes.
Yeah.
And we became a lake facing community. And it's just, ways that we can bring it back to downtown. So, and I don't know exactly how, but
I think a good example of what you're talking about, we had, our Riverfront path for which we have funding. In our plan initially, sketches, we showed it starting like at Bay State. Well, wait, we have a section here to connect to the bridge. And then the flyaway trail, those sections that are missing, we have to remember to connect them in. So that's a great
Yeah.
suggestion. Just when we're planning to look at the connections.
Agreed.
and funders look at that.
You might have a little bit of that in the goal that says incorporate park improvements into downtown.
Correct.
I think it kind of touches a little bit on what Aaron is talking about, but maybe just not as specific.
Yeah, and we don't have, that's a really good point, is we can reiterate it in both spots as well. And in fact, I'm gonna go steal the language directly. There's nothing wrong with doing that twice. Here we go. And we can wordsmith more, but if you wanna wordsmith it now, let me know. All right. Any other comments in general on this overall document? Are we feeling confident about it? Last time, forgive me, I was gone, but Carlos said that you guys all felt really, really comfortable with the way things were looking. Rahel, you're not in your head. I can't see you, Mary.
I
You
know,
look-
I'm nodding too, yes.
Okay, perfect. So if that is the case, we'll feel comfortable proposing this to the steering committee. There will be 2 review sessions for the steering committee, one on September 8th and one on September 29th. And what we're looking for is for every subcommittee to have a representative to be able to speak to the section that they worked on. In this case, we'd be looking for one member of the subcommittee who might be willing to make time there to do so. Now, on those dates, we're planning on having those review sessions run from 11 to 1 o'clock, so it's a 2-hour session. But if you can't carve 2 hours of your day out, we are going to try and schedule 20-minute sections for the individual subcommittee people to present so that we know that we're keeping it moving, because we have 12 of these to get through for the steering committee to hear. So who has an appetite for talking and who has time to do so? And Rahel, you're on the steering committee, so you are not allowed to say that you would like to do this.
Certainly have that to talking, most days, but, the timing, I'm not quite sure of, but,
Okay.
definitely would be willing.
I was gonna nominate.
Oh, okay. Well, then I'll
I'm glad
make
you
the time.
volunteered.
So I'm sorry to ask this and interrupt this meeting, but on economic development, we have 2 steering committee members. We were going to have them report. You want someone else to do the reporting?
If you want them to and they're
Okay.
comfortable, that's fine. Our goal is to diversify the voices.
Diversify it. Yep.
Yeah, as much as possible.
We have another meeting coming.
You do have a lot of really good people, and those 2 members of the steering committee, just like you, Rahel, are excellent individuals. So I'm not shying away if they want to really do it. That's fine. But Ethan, we're happy to have you. Is everybody else comfortable with Ethan doing so?
All in favor? Aye.
All right. There was no motion or second, but I trust it.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a consensus to do so. If you're not available, I'll reach out to the subcommittee.
Oh, okay.
So with that, this final draft document, I'm gonna clean it up ever so slightly, make sure that it's available for the steering committee on the 8th. I will send it out to all of you for last minute changes, because we do have a couple people who couldn't make it today. So if anybody wants to suggest anything, it's always a draft until we adopt this in June of next year. So please feel free.
I have one more question. We talked about signage
Yes.
and wayfinding within the downtown. Does this talk about getting to the downtown? I'm thinking, there's like a great sign on 61, but once you turn onto Huff, there's nothing else that really kind of says, you're not there yet, you're not there yet.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Let me go find that website section. So we have developing a strategic sign plan that incorporates consistent signage for downtown with the rest of Winona. This language we're putting in multiple sections of the comprehensive plan because it is going to be really important. We've noticed that signage is an issue, so that we're hoping the strategic sign plan will actually include those types of
Okay.
actions. So that's why we're calling
There's
that
a
out there.
right there. Yeah.
I didn't capitalize it because we just don't know if we're gonna get that project approved at any point to actually do the work at this point. So it's lowercase. Yep.
I have a question. I didn't look at the goals and objectives yet.
Mhm.
One thing the comp plan is used for is for grants and things like that in the downtown and riverfront. And I'm trying to recall the strategic plan.
Mhm.
Do you talk about taking underutilized land or brownfields mentioned or anything like that. I don't want to put words in people's mouths, but for example, where Main Square is, there was $500,000 in cleanup to make that happen. And sometimes when we're doing grants, they say, well, does your comp plan support cleaning up contaminated land or brownfields or higher and better use of property? And I didn't know if we had that in there or if anyone wanted it in there or if it's just a given, but
We do just have talking about, reusing parking lots.
yes.
But
they're
we,
all contained.
we should definitely add maybe a brownfield. I think that's a really good suggestion. If everybody else is comfortable with it, I think adding brownfield redevelopment as objective is really valuable.
Or even under the redevelopment category somewhere.
Yeah, this is right under increasing development
Yep.
momentum in downtown. So yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah, I think that's a very good one, because I did not know about that. And you said that's most of the parking lot?
No, we don't. It's we know the one behind the movie theater. And we know where Main Square was. So
Okay.
sometimes there's challenges in old river towns with old areas that were used for things.
That reminds me of a slightly off topic question, but I've wanted to mean to ask for a while. Basically, how far can you dig down in downtown? Like,
Good question.
okay.
Before you hit water, is what your question?
Yes, I mean, how practical, so,
So it doesn't flood or? like-
right, yeah, how practical is underground parking? I know Main Square has that.
Main Square is 4 feet above first floor grade, actually, because they didn't want to go all the way down. So it's just partially submerged.
Okay,
When they designed that, they looked at the 68 flood level, or, they did a lot of research to set that elevation.
okay,
But it depends which area of downtown you're in. Right along the riverfront, it would be difficult to go down very far.
okay.
And part of it depends on the time of year, because the river level kind of determines
Okay.
where it is too, but
So in the whole, it's pretty difficult to put basement parking under buildings.
I think a partial is something that would be
Best.
good to
Okay.
encourage, but
That's about. the
We
best
can't
I
get-
can do.
12 foot.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm
That
just,
makes sense.
I'm just thinking of lacrosse and lacrosse, all of those are, it's like 3 floors of parking and then the
Okay.
building.
Yeah.
It's,
Okay, just
they
curious.
probably have the same.
Yeah.
Situation.
It's tough.
Mm.
It's definitely tough. So not very far is the answer.
Okay,
But
cool.
the actual number really does determine. I agree with Lucy. I don't think it's more than a floor for any spot probably in downtown. And even then, that's questionable.
And expensive.
Very.
Yeah.
And correct me if I'm wrong, I think our estimates for structured parking, that's above ground, not below ground, was $27,000 a space. Yep. And so below ground, usually you double that is my understanding,
Okay.
but I don't think we explored that for an actual number.
Just ballpark figures.
In general, people say 30 to 40. So much depends on the size of your parcel when you're doing structured parking, but a ballpark, that's how much per stall it costs, so it's
30 to 40.
1,000 per stall.
And some cities are up in $60,000 of parking space. I mean, it's expensive,
Very expensive.
very. Compared to $8,000 per space for a surface parking lot, and then I rule of thumb, I use about 10 just to do quick math.
Okay.
Yeah.
That is-
I'd never heard the term brownfield. What,
Sure, is that Mary? Hi,
Yeah.
Mary. You see, so what that refers, it's a very common term in the economic development area. So some of the grants that we go after are called redevelopment grants, cleanup for brownfields. So brownfield means a site that could be developed, but for the contamination that exists there. So if we can take this property and clean it up appropriately, we're very, it's monitored by MPCA and deed. And if we can clean up that property so that it can be used in another manner, that's kind of the idea. Brownfield return refers to,
something that's contaminated? Okay.
damages usually related.
Challenges is a very good, good phrase for it.
But it's interesting if you can't go down too far, it's really not, is surface level contamination though? Is that in our case? I'm thinking of the 60 main parking lot.
right, so that's about 5 feet that has to be dug out and new material brought up. And it
Is
is,
Main Square, is that the only place that we have down underground parking downtown?
yes,
Yeah. I guess it is. Yeah. You could be the first one or the second one, build an underground parking garage and charge people lots of money, Mary.
Well, I live nearby that old theater on Fifth and John Street, and they do underground parking there. Where the old cinema was, kitty corner from Eby's.
Gary Himes building.
I did not know that.
I think it
That's
is, or maybe it's ground floor parking.
No.
Anyway,
internal garage, but it's not, I don't know how deep that actually is. All right. Well, if there aren't any further additions at this time, I'll just be sure to send this out in a clean version to everybody, and this can be our final meeting, everybody. Thank you all so very much.
Thank you.
And don't
thank
be
you, Luke.
some of you I don't know very well. Amber, I just met you during this process. Ethan, I just met you during this process. I love interacting with all of you. Please come on and say hi to our community development staff at any point. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Luke.
Of course, Mary.